Insane in the membrane.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This week I'm joined by the mighty Paul Zerdin. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Where in the world do we find you, Paul?
I am in my little office in deepest, darkest Surrey, in Cobham.
Oh, very nice too. Yeah. For some reason, I thought you were in the States. Is that? Or are you just sort of back and forth?
That's the funny thing is I think people think I'm in America now, and I actually haven't been to America since before the pandemic.
Oh, really?
I was going backwards and forwards. Yeah, I was going backwards and forwards between the UK and the US right up until the pandemic, and that completely ballsed it all up.
No.
And
Oh, mate.
I've been back for some meetings, but other than that, no, the gigs that all stopped. Unfortunately, the pandemic really messed that up, as it did, to showbiz generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it did. Yeah, but that's such a that's it. Like, because when your name comes up when gigs and things like that, it's like, oh yeah, well, he's in America now. We just assume you're there, and you don't realize. I don't think we realise how damaging the lockdowns and the pandemics have been. I think we're still recovering from it, not just financially, but I think mentally as well. I think it's really affected us. And like you say, you almost had to start again, which is something that we thought we'd never have to do.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because you spend your life building something up, and then it's sort of taken away from you. But when over the years I've always worked, and then decide if I haven't worked, I've decided to take some time off to write a new show or to go on holiday or whatever. I've always been in charge of that. I've been in control of it. Right, I'm not going to work for this week or these 2 weeks. We're going to go away somewhere, whatever. But when suddenly the world says you're not going to work. Yeah, but I'm not. No, you're not going to work. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a whole different ball game. And especially when we're live performers primarily, and it's all about being in a room with an audience. So that was a very difficult thing to cope with. But I was lucky. I had a good time for a while on the back of AGT in the States. I did Vegas for 6 months, and then after that, I toured America quite a few times. I was backwards and forwards across the Atlantic. I felt like David Frost at one point, but without Concorde. So I kind of think, well, I had a good run of it, but I would very much like to do more work in America because it's such an amazing place, and I love traveling as well. I don't like being in one place, so I like moving around. With an act like mine, you have to travel.
And how was it received in America? I mean, that's the thing as well, because it's so vast. It's almost like I remember hearing bands talking about the fact that you might be big in one city or one state, but they've never heard of you somewhere else. It must have been tricky. Do you have to travel? Do you have to go to all the states separately, or because of America's Got Talent, they sort of said, or they did that you were sort of in the door already with most places? Do you know what I mean? Is it quite it's so vast?
Yeah, it's enormous. I remember I was going for meetings. I just won the show, the talent show, and I was going from a show in New York to LA, and I was going for meetings in LA, and then I had to go back to New York, so I was doing a casino up in New York State. And I remember being on the flight, and it was like 7 hours from New York to LA, and I was thinking, this is almost the flight I've just done from the UK to the US. I didn't realize. I knew it was a big old place, but I just couldn't quite comprehend it until I was at 38,000 feet looking out the window thinking, oh my God, this is just massive. And so when my Vegas show closed, I started touring, and I was doing, basically you do some theaters, you do casinos, and they have big old venues like the Coliseum in the, I think it's the Coliseum in Caesar's Palace in a place called Caesar's in Ontario, in Canada, just over the border in Ontario, in a place called Windsor. and that's like a 5,000 seater. So you're playing these big kind of almost like arena gigs, and then the next thing is
Yeah.
next weekend you're in a comedy club. But you do the thing in America is you do the whole show. So rather than there being a bill of 4 or 5 comics and a compare, you would have an opening act for 15 minutes, and then you'd do an hour and a half straight through, and
Right.
then
Okay.
you'd do 2 sittings. You'd do maybe one on a Thursday, 2 Friday, 2 Saturday, maybe 2 Sunday, and then Monday you travel, and then Tuesday you do press.
Wow.
Wednesday you do press, and then you start that again, and you just do it week after week. And you'd have to fly, because I would be in New York, or I'd be in
Yeah.
Tampa in Florida, then I'd be in Phoenix in Arizona. So you'd have to fly. I mean, ideally, you want to be on a tour
Yeah.
bus and just drive around. But the way that my agents planned it, you certainly couldn't do it on by road. You had to fly. So yeah, and that was when I really realised how big America is, and Canada.
Yeah. And your head must have been spinning. I mean, like, there must have been days where you're like, where am I again?
It was, yeah. What made it worse was that after all the travel, you'd fly into somewhere, and you'd stay in some very average hotel, and it's not glamorous at all, as you know. And
Mm.
then you'd be up at 4 o'clock in the morning doing the breakfast television show in that state, or then followed by radio and stuff. So by about 11 o'clock in the morning, when you're going for breakfast, I'd be with my tour manager. Uh, we'd be like zombies, because we'd been up since half
Yeah.
three, 4 o'clock, and then being picked up, taken to a
Oh my God.
studio. And so by 11 o'clock, you're absolutely your brain is frazzled, and it was like that every week after week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
toured for quite a few months at a time, but I got to travel. I got to see some amazing places. So I just felt tired a lot of the time. That was the thing. But when I was doing America's Got Talent, I had already got a lot of gigs in the book. I I got through. I got through to the live shows, and I was working on cruise ships and doing corporate gigs back in the UK and around Europe. So I was flying backwards and forwards uh,
Oh, right.
to
Okay.
to go and do the next heat, the quarterfinals. Then I'd be back home to go off on a ship in Oslo, and then I'd be back doing the semi-finals. And so when I actually won the show, and I've said this before, but when I won it, I was totally sort of blown away. But it was a mixture of euphoria and jet lag,
Yeah.
because I was
Yeah.
knackered.
Yeah. You're like, oh, thank God for that. It all paid off. I did Britain's Got Talent a little while ago, and it's one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done. It was petrifying. And I've been, like you, I've been gigging a long time, I've got a handle on it, and I don't really get nervous at gigs now. Really, you get apprehensive and you want it to go well, but you kind of know you can do it. But this was something else. When it was waiting around all day, and then when they finally say, right, you're up, and they take you through, and then in this country they take you through. They're videoing you all the time, aren't they? And then there's Ant and Dec, and then you meet them, and then suddenly you're in front of the judges, and you're just like, shit. And it's the Palladium as well. I genuinely was trying really hard not to. I had the microphone. I was just shaking like that. Most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done, I think. I mean, what was it the same for you when you did it?
Yeah, it's I was there. My first audition was at the Dolby Theatre, um, and I was there from about 7 o'clock in the morning,
Right?
and
Yeah.
they said I would be on probably, I don't know, lunchtime. Then I started filming the sort of B-roll, the VT stuff, and then someone else was filming me, and then because you've been doing it. We've been doing it for a long time. We're experienced performers, so we know how to do an interview. We
Yeah.
know how to to condense an answer down to 20 seconds and just give them the funny line or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You learn how to do that, but you find yourself sitting around, as you say. And I had my girlfriend with me, and I basically said to her, "Your job here is to stop me leaving." Thinking, I don't need this, I'm going. When it gets when it just gets too, it's just the day has become too long. Anyway, I forget how many shows they were doing. I think they were taping 2 shows in an afternoon or in an evening. I can't remember. Anyway, I was on the first show, and then they said, "Oh no, you've been moved to the second half of the show," and then, "Oh no, you're going to be in the beginning of the next show," and so it just went on out, and I was like, and so your adrenaline, you don't get nervous about doing a gig. You've been doing it for a long time. I don't. Some people I know, that I work with, will be worrying about the gig all day. And that's just the way they are. Whereas I think, don't let it ruin your life. Let's you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Get to the gig, and then literally just as they say your name and you're about to go up on stage, then you have a little buzz, a little bit of adrenaline, something kicks in, and that's
it.
That's the way I do it anyway. And I remember just up, the adrenaline was up and down because you ready to go, and then I'm not ready. But I realised that they liked me, and they kept moving me to a better slot. But
okay. Well, that's good.
But then I realised, hang on a minute, the audience are going to get knackered. But they changed the audience, so we had a fresh audience. And then I was in the beginning of the first show. Then they moved me of the first half. Then they moved me to the second half of the last show. And I was thinking, oh no! And then you start hearing, when you hear that buzzer sound, that sends chills down your spine, doesn't it? And when you're there, it's bloody loud.
Yeah, so loud. It's the loudest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it is horrible, and then you go, oh my God, and then suddenly you realise actually what you're in for, and eventually I got to go. I walked out on stage, and I thought, right, in my head, I'm thinking, why are you doing this? You've been doing this for a long time. Your career's going okay. And now you're putting yourself in a position where there's 4 people, and you recognise all these 4 people who are looking very intimidating, and they could absolutely, rip your career to shreds. The thing with the American thing was my thinking behind that was, well, I'm in a different country. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. This is not my home turf, so it doesn't matter. Just go for it. But I also knew that my material worked quite well for an American crowd because I'd been on American ships on and off for years.
Of course.
So I knew that I could work an American audience. But you're still putting yourself out there, and to be judged. Luckily, it went really well. But I did have that moment in my head thinking, what are you doing?
I was a bit of a snob about it when it came up, and they were like, we want you to do it, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I don't know. I wasn't looking down on it, but I was like, no, I don't need to do that. And then they kept asking, and I went, all right, okay, I'll do it. And then there was there's just something about Simon Cowell when he smiles at you, it's beguiling. There's something about him. When I was doing my bit, and I saw in the corner of my eye, I could see his teeth. I could see he was smiling. I was like, all right, okay, that's quite nice. And it just felt, it was like this kind of warm feeling of just like approval from your dad. It was really nice, which I didn't expect, to be honest.
No, and that's that's really helpful when you get that. Not everyone gets that, and so you can understand why people, and particularly comedy performers, are worried about going on that show, because there have been occasions in the past where people have had successful. They're not particularly well known, but they're great acts, and they make a good living doing it. And the reason for going on the show is to get that exposure, which is why we all do it or have done it.
Yeah.
But there is a risk attached to it. It's a sort of calculated risk if you're a good act, but it's still a risk.
Yes.
But I think it's worth. Well, for me, for the American thing, it was definitely worth the risk. And I think now as well, with Britain's Got Talent, they are much more aware of the damage that it can do to a comedy performer. And I think they are a bit more appreciative now of the comics and just stand up generally on that show. And I don't think there are as many bad endings for comics as there were. So I think it is worth doing, but you've got to think about it, because it is a big deal, but it can be an absolute game changer.
Yeah, Yeah. It was one of those that it was even. This is the thing, people don't realise when they talk about stand-ups and they go, "Oh, we only do 20 minutes a day." You go, "Well, no, I don't." Like you said earlier, 7 hours on a flight. Then you've got to get to your gig. You've got to come up with new material. There's so much that goes on. I think some people, if you don't know what we do, they seem to think that we just sit around, just having this life where we just doss about all day. But we're not. We're just constantly thinking of the next new thing that we have to come up with just to keep in the game. Because if we don't, we'll just get. There'll be someone else will come through, and suddenly you're not working anymore. It's tricky. I feel like I'm always trying. I'm still needing to fight my corner. You know.
Yeah. I remember once just talking about, traveling and being knackered, and yet still you've got to be, no matter what kind of a day you've had, you've got to get up on stage, and you've got to be on it, and you've got to
Yeah.
be the best you can be. And I have to say, I'm actually quite good when I'm knackered, because I've got an element of, I don't care, it doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
I can go out, and I've come up with some ad libs and tried a routine that I haven't fully learnt yet, but I thought, it's really good. I'm sure I'll be able to busk it and get my way through it. And I've done it on a night when I'm jet lagged from a long haul flight the day before or something, and I'm so tired I actually don't care. I just think, well, I might as well just make the most of this stage time and have gone for it. And that hasn't always worked. Sometimes I've been shit because I've just been too knackered. But
Yeah.
I quite like that. I'll give an example. I was doing a comedy festival in Johannesburg, and I was flying out the day before, and I was closing the show, and there were a load of amazing acts on the show, South African comedians, an American comedian, all sorts, and I was the closing act, and my flight got cancelled, and they said, we'll put you on a Lufthansa flight instead. And I said, no, I've used my miles, and I've got myself up to upper class on Virgin, and I got it all sorted.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we'll put you on Lufthansa. And I said to Virgin, what's the next one? They said, well, we'll move the flights now in the morning. And I said, I get there in time, but I get there in the evening. But what time am I actually? What's my stage time? And they said, you'll be on at about 10:30, and the flight gets in at like 9. And I thought, that's tight, but I'm willing to risk it. So the promoter's having kittens. And I said, honestly, it'll be fine. And they always give you that time, but they usually get in a bit earlier, so it'll be fine. Anyway, the plane gets in a bit later than advertised.
Oh no!
And they sent a taxi, and because it's rush hour as well. The traffic there was terrible, and so they sent like this sort of kind of convoy where I had like a police escort, and they took me down the hard shoulder of the motorway from the airport to this big. It was a big theatre, in big casino complex in Johannesburg, and I got there, and the compere is just taking the last act off, the penultimate act, and is just going through all a bit more routine or a routine before he's about to introduce me, and I'm in the wing, literally just throwing my clothes out, trying to get the puppets out, and just put my bag into some sort of order that I can walk on and do my act. And I'm literally they're going, "Are you ready?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine." I'm thinking, "Where's the other puppet? Hang on." And there's socks and pants going everywhere. and I remember he just said my name. He said my name, and I walked out, and I had one of the best gigs of my life. It was fantastic.
Oh, amazing.
I just thought, God, if only they'd have known, if the audience had seen what had been going on that had led to this moment, led up to it, they wouldn't have believed it. But that was an example of just, tiredness, jet lag, euphoria. And I think I'd had a couple of drinks on the flight as well. So, I hadn't helped myself.
Oh, nice. It was it was perfect. The perfect chemistry. Everything worked. I think that's it. When the day I thought, the day I stopped caring as much. I do care, of course I care. But the day I went, for fuck's sake, I'm not gonna let this get to me. I started having better gigs. I started having, like you just said, I'm more relaxed with it now. And especially when I'm tired, as you just said, I say things I never even knew I was going to say. But if I'm like with Britain's Got Talent, because I was thinking about it so much, I was getting in my own way. It was becoming, I almost had to tell myself to shut up. It was just too much.
Yeah. But also because it is a pressure gig, and so you build it up, and it becomes a big thing, and also everyone knows it, so it is a big gig. And you have to
Yeah.
somehow, I remember having that thought in my head when I was doing the live shows at Radio City in New York.
Wow.
And it was the semi-finals, either semi-finals or finals. And I remember just having a bit of a chat with myself in the wing. I mean, people are used to me talking to myself anyway. So there's no big shock there. But I remember just saying to myself, don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up, Zerdin. Apparently there was just 20 million or something watching on NBC Live, and there's 6,000 people in Radio City Music Hall. I remember thinking, this is an opportunity. You can either go, oh, I'm scared, and I just thought, no, I've got no time for any of that shit. I'm going to go out there and grab this moment by the balls and just go, yes. I've been waiting for a moment like this for a while, and luckily it went that way. But I could have. Sometimes you've gone, doing a corporate gig. I remember doing a corporate gig in Scotland, and it was I can't remember what football team it was, but I remember thinking it was all male audience. It wasn't mixed crowd. It was all male. I thought, that's going to be hard. And I went on stage just after they'd done a 10-minute montage of the best goals from the season. And the audience are like, yeah, they're all going nuts.
Oh,
I just thought, now a puppet show. Yeah, this is really going to go well. and I got the player of the year out. He was the guy they wanted me to get up on stage and become my human puppet, which is the thing I do with these. I got these animatronic masks, and I give them a silly voice to get them to do silly things.
Yeah.
And they said, you've got to get him. So I got him out, and he was very drunk. And so I got away with it. But you just know that it's gigs like that you kind of you get a bit. I get a bit jittery. No matter how much experience you've got, you just go, well, it's a corporate gig. Everything's against you. The chances of this going well are really, really, stacked up against me. But sometimes you can pull it off.
I think with a night like that as well, with a comedy club or your own show, you're more in control of it, aren't you? The people at the comedy club, they know why they're there. So they're more. Every now and again, you get something happen that you're not aware, you didn't know was going to happen, but most of the time you're in control of it. But with a night like that, where everyone's pissed anyway, there are too many moving parts, and you, like you say, could go anywhere, and you're just sitting there. You've got your puppet, and you've got your other bits, and you just oh god, this could go anywhere. I don't know what to do. It's a funny one. They're tough gigs, man.
There they are, and I've done them for years. But of course, there was this massive gap in our our working life with the pandemic, and I hate mentioning it because everyone's sick of it. But it has had a massive effect on the business, and also the corporate hospitality has suffered, as we know. The corporate entertainment side of things has really dropped off, and it's coming back now. So I've just started to do them again, but I feel rusty because I haven't been doing a lot of them like I used to, and that's been that's a knock-on effect from the pandemic, which is almost 2-3 years been going on for things to sort of start coming back now. And I think also audiences have changed. I think audiences for a while have forgotten how to be audiences. Some of the gigs I've done, people have just been so rude and and I think they're just used to sitting on a sofa and watching Netflix and Disney Plus. I really think that they've kind of forgotten. I think some gigs have been amazing after the pandemic, but some gigs have been absolute hell and a nightmare. And I think that they just they've forgotten how to do it, how to be an audience. But it's getting better. It's not all doom and gloom.
What do you do because this is what happens, the longer you do what we do, the bad gigs, there's a bigger gap in between the bad gigs, but every now and again you're blindsided, you didn't see one coming, and you have a shit night. What do you do? Do you just carry on? It must be difficult. I know there's an act, the double act called the Raymond and Mr. Timpkins Review, and because all of their stuff is on a track, once they start, they can't stop. They have to keep going. And I've only ever seen it fail once, and it was spectacular. You just go, shit, there's no way out. Like, what do you do?
They're not going for it. Yeah. Well, I've toured with those guys. Those boys have supported me on tour.
Brilliant.
And
Brilliant.
We did a festival in Cape Town as well. So we spent a lot of time together. And
I love them dearly. They're such good lads.
Me too. And I only ever once saw them never die, but they just split the room. Half the audience who'd come to see me, so they didn't know they were going to see a support act. Half the audience absolutely went for it and were crying with laughter, like their normal reaction, because they are brilliant.
Brilliant.
And half the audience were like, "What is this? The fuck is this? This isn't what we paid to see." But that's not necessarily their fault.
No.
So, but yeah, no, it's funny. I love them. When you have, it's funny enough. I was doing a gig just before Christmas, and I was trying out it was a comedy club, just outside London, and I was just trying a couple of bits out, and I was talking to the promoter, and it was in a hotel, and we were in the room just before and just having a catch up chat. And for some reason we got talking about bad gigs. And I said, I haven't had a bad gig in ages. I feel really lucky, but I also know that's not a good thing because there's one round the corner.
Every time.
And he said, "Oh no," he said, "Mate, this gig is lovely. They're ready for you. You will love them." And I got on stage, and I'm having a lovely, lovely time. There was a woman right in front of me just filming, and I got a bit pissed off that she was filming. So eventually I told her, just stop filming. Come on, look, I'm here. You don't need to record this. And it was still a lovely, lovely gig. And then I went into a bit of material, and there was a woman that was incredibly drunk at the back that didn't understand what I was talking about and thought I was saying something that I wasn't. It was a big misunderstanding. Anyway, she absolutely fucked the gig up for about 5 minutes. But they were all on my side, and then I turned them against her. And so, this woman was so drunk, she'd been asked to leave, and she wouldn't leave, and they couldn't get her to leave. But she kept on shouting and heckling, and the audience were going, "Shut up!" like that, and I'm like, "Yeah, shut up." And my puppets are all telling them to shut up, And it became like, oh, and so suddenly the gig took an absolute fucking nosedive for about 5 minutes. But I persevered. I went into a whole different bit. And I did a thing where I get a man and a woman out, and they become my human puppets, and I leave them on stage, and they're being operated radio controlled by me, and voice, but I'm nowhere near the stage, and I get them doing things, and the laughs were so big it drowned out this stupid drunk woman at the back, and so I managed to get it back, but she then went and complained to the management, and there was a big old to-do afterwards that kicked off while I was trying to get my props off the stage and just get to the car. But, I jinxed it. I just jinxed it just before the gig by saying, I haven't had a bad gig, and I'm sure there's one just around the corner, and there it was, But I got it back.
Every time.
Sometimes you can, as you know, there's it, walking off to the sound of your own footsteps. It's not something that happens often, touch wood, but it happens, and it has happened. And it's not very nice.
This is the thing, like you say, sometimes you just don't connect with an audience. There's whatever reason, especially when you're coming up. I mean, now you're doing your own shows, so people they know what they're getting. They know they're coming to see you. So it's not like with a regular comedy night where there's 4 acts and people don't really know who you are, but they wanted to go to a comedy night. They trust that comedy club, so this is always a good night. Let's go and see who's on, and then you just have that. It's just that where the chemistry's not there. You don't connect. It's hard to get over.
Yeah,
you do take it personally, and it's always when it's in a club that's the furthest away from your house.
Yes, and so you've got all that time to think about why it went so badly going home. and I remember when I was starting out, and I used to do, I didn't start doing the clubs. I started doing holiday parks and cruise ships when I was 17. That's where I started. So I sort of did it in a funny sort of roundabout way. And I'd come back from working on a cruise ship in Scandinavia, entertaining very drunk Finns and Swedes that were going basically across between Sweden and Finland, but their English was pretty good, and they got most of my stuff. And I was doing magic. I was doing comedy magic at that time, and just introducing the ventriloquism into the show. And I came back after doing 2 months, sort of summer season there, and I felt so confident. My then agent sent me up to the northeast to do working men's clubs and some really rough caravan parks and stuff, and that was a real shocker. And I remember driving back one night from Cleethorpes, and I'd had a terrible gig. And I remember you used to have to wait in the kitchens. They had these sort of doors that you had to come out of the kitchen, and that was the way onto the stage. And and I driven 4 hours to Cleethorpes. I've got changed you couldn't call it a dressing room. And then I was on stage and someone threw something at me. That was the first time I'd had something thrown at me. I think it was an ashtray or something.
Oh my God.
And I had a terrible, terrible gig, and I was supposed to do 45 minutes, and I think it was about 25, maybe 30.
Oh,
I don't know. Anyway, I got back in the
yeah.
car, and I had another 4-hour drive home, and in my little Peugeot 205 diesel, thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And it was such a shock to the system after I'd had such a great summer working on a small cruise ship. And I had lots more of those moments. But then I think that's what separates the people that can't hack it and the people that actually think, yeah, okay, I'm either going to let this beat me or I'm going to rise above it and find a way of coping with it, and it makes you a better person. But if someone said, what am I trying to say? If someone said, it's not if someone said, if I say it, if I'd have looked back now and realised how far and how difficult it was going to be to get to where I think I wanted to be when I was starting out, I think I probably would have given up. But you don't. You've got something inside you that something that that keeps you going.
Yeah. There is that thing, isn't it? I've said I emceed the Chortle Student Comedy Awards the other night, and I was explaining to them. I said, look, this isn't the end of your career if you don't get through. And I said, but you always know after your first gig whether you want to do it again. There's just a switch that flips, and you go, whether it goes well or not, you kind of go, yeah, I want to do this again. And like you say, there is that thing that just, I don't even know what it is. That just that thing that goes, no, I know I can do this. That was shit. I feel terrible now, but I've got another gig tomorrow, so I just need to just get home. And it's weird, the thing that just drives you. I can't even tell you what it is. I don't even it's just called drive, I guess. I don't know. It's just
it's
odd.
just that something about it, isn't it? That you just love it, and you want to do more of it, even though it's not necessarily going to be easy. And I think also just talking about doing a theatre show, doing touring and stuff, which I've toured quite a lot really for over the last sort of 10 years or so, and you kind of go, yes, it's like a comedy club in a way. Even if you're an unknown act, you've still got them on your side to start with, because they've come to a comedy club and they know that they're going to see comedians, and so half the battle is won, unless you're really shit and you fuck it up, or you just have a bad night. You're halfway there because they've paid to come and see a comedy show, and like a corporate, they don't know you're on, and you've got to win them over. And again, with you being on too late, them being too drunk, the room not being good, pillars in the way, balloons in the way, all sorts of shit that the people just don't think about, that are against you. So that's why they pay really well, because you have to go through a lot of shit to win them over and make a good gig. But even with a theatre tour, and even if you've got an audience that you've built up, and you've got people that paid come and see you, and I feel very, very lucky that I can tour and people will decide on a wet Thursday night in wherever I am, that they'll part with, I don't know, 20 quid a ticket, whatever it is, to come and see me in my little puppet show. And so I feel very lucky and privileged. But also, even though they know who you are and they've paid to see you, I feel like there's more pressure, because they like the last show or they like the last tour. This has got to be better, even though they won't necessarily remember all of the last tour, unless they see the special, which is Paul Zerdin hands free on my Paul Zerdin YouTube channel, now showing. Then they'll remember.
We'll put links to it on this.
But,
yeah.
Thank you. And you've got the pressure. The pressure is on. So you've got that moment. You've got a minute or two minutes of grace, but then you've still got to come up with the goods. And I think there's more pressure. And I actually find it.
Yeah.
It's harder, I think, the more you tour. It's good in a way because it helps me generate new material. But this weekend I'm doing comedy clubs, just trying out new bits, which will then go into the new into the new tour, which I
Yeah.
then start touring beginning of September.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And when you, I mean, I know you've been asked this question a million times. What got you in? What made you get into ventriloquism? What was it that did you? I mean, were you always fascinated by it, a fan of it, or did it just kind of just sort of naturally could become part of your act? Like since you were doing magic and things like that, it kind of, to me, because when I was growing up,
Yeah,
it was all kind of the same thing. There was, do you know what I mean? It was that there was
yeah,
always a ventriloquist and a magician and things like that.
yeah,
So was that the same for you?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd grown up watching Sesame Street, and I just loved anything to do with the Muppets. And I knew that I wanted to do something with a Muppet. I know it sounds a bit weird, but I knew I wanted to do something that involved comedy and puppets. And I'd been given a magic set for my 9th or 10th birthday, or it might have been a Christmas present actually. And I took to that. I really just loved it, and I annoyed the hell out of everyone in my family with card tricks and things. And I got quite good at it. Then when I left school, I think the turning point was we had a school talent competition in my last term, and during on Saturday afternoons, I'd become a member of a magic club connected to a famous magic shop in London called Davenport's, and
Right.
I learned a lot then and made a lot of friends, a lot of contacts. And anyway, I hired an illusion, and I rehearsed it. And so on the school talent show, someone sang a song, someone maybe read a poem, did a tap dance. I levitated my sister, and it blew them away. And I remember just that moment. From that moment onwards, in the school, in the dining room, in the dining hall, just around the school, people would be pointing at me, going, "That's Zerdin. He can do magic," And I'd made a real impression.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
when I left school after the meeting with my careers advisor, and he said, what are you going to do when you leave school? And I said, I'm going to become a professional magician. And he said, I don't know how to help you with that. And I said, I think I know what I'm going to do, and I think I know how I'm going to do it. And at that time, I'd been given a book on how to become a ventriloquist, and I loved.
Right.
I'd never really seen a ventriloquist until I saw a ventriloquist called Ray Allen and Lord Charles,
Oh
who was
yes,
on the
yeah,
Paul
yeah,
Daniels
yeah.
show, and I that suddenly everything fell into place. I thought, well, I can do magic. I love the comedy, and then I've seen this thing called ventriloquism, where there's a puppeteer, because at that point I'd only seen the Muppets, where the puppeteers were hidden underneath the camera,
That's right. Yeah.
and it was just the puppet, and I thought, oh my god, this is the perfect vehicle. This is a ventriloquist. This is a puppeteer who's in vision, so I can still be the star of the show and there with the puppet. But the thing is, I have to now learn how to keep this still, keep my lips still,
Yeah.
and create the voice and the puppet, as if he's a separate entity. I didn't realize how difficult that was. And so I practiced for a couple of years, but it was all connected. And so I then put my magic act together, and then I introduced the puppet into it, and eventually I phased the magic out and did more of the puppet and the stand-up comedy, and that's kind of how it all sort of fell into place over a few years.
Yeah. I always found it amazing that because your brain knows that it's a puppet, but after a minute or so, your brain just goes, "Oh, that's a person," and it just you just can't. It's just you forget that you're the one controlling it. And so, like when you'd watch Ray Allen and people like that when I was a kid, that was just that the puppet was a person,
Yeah,
and then it's so
yeah,
yeah, it's weird how your brain does that. It goes, "Oh yeah, that's two people now," and even though another voice
yeah,
goes, "No, but he's controlling the other one," you go, "No, that's two people."
yeah.
It's really weird how it
Yeah,
works.
you buy into it. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and even if you're not a ventriloquist, if you look, there's a really good interview. I forget what the show is, but it's a really good interview on YouTube with Jim Henson, and he's got Kermit on his arm, and he's
Yeah,
talking about. It's a two shot of Kermit and Jim Henson, and he's talking about the fact he's not a ventriloquist, he's a puppeteer. But and then Kermit starts talking, and he says, I move my lips because I'm not a ventriloquist. And then the camera just sort of tightens and goes into a single shot of Kermit. And he says, but generally, the Kermit, he's doing Kermit's voice, and he's saying, but generally, the frog is far more interesting to look at than the bearded man. And you are looking at Kermit because you believe he's real, but you know that there's
Yeah.
folk there doing it. But it's somehow even though it's not ventriloquism, you buy into a puppet. It's like, when my nephew was much younger, and I would just get a little puppet character, and I would be doing a silly voice. Even if I wasn't doing ventriloquism, I was hiding behind the sofa or something, and just doing the puppet. He
Yeah.
could see me, but he still would talk to the puppet.
See, it's fascinating. Your brain. It's like when I was talking to Nicholas Pinnock, who's an actor, and he was on here, and he said that your brain doesn't know you're acting. So all the if you're in a really heavy scene, like really stressful, emotional scene, your brain thinks that that's really happening, and so it takes you a while afterwards to get over it. And it must be the same.
Yeah.
Having done it for many years, do you talk to the puppets when you're on your own? Like, I mean, that's a silly question, but
No, it's not, because I think that's what people think ventriloquists are like, and I think that's why they think ventriloquists are mad. I'm pleased to say I don't speak to them when I'm off stage, apart from when I'm learning new material and learning lines. I will be pacing around the house, but generally I will learn the show and the new script, without the puppet there. I'll just be doing the voices and learn it, and then the last piece of the jigsaw is to then go through it with the puppet and make sure that everything works and I can do it. I can do the puppetry and all of that side of things, but I don't speak to the puppets alone. I've heard stories of ventriloquists. For example, I don't know who it was. Apparently, it was an American ventriloquist. Was performing at the Palladium. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the gig hadn't gone very well, and they were overheard. They were overheard in the dressing room. The ventriloquist was talking to the puppet and saying to him, "You weren't funny tonight. You really let me down." And I really hope that's true, because I love that.
I mean, that's great. I'm giving him a pep talk. Come on, man, you're better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you find it like with with the pandemic? Did you just because we all had to stop what we were doing? Did the puppets just get left in a bag and then that was it? You're like, I'll just deal with that later on, or did you have them out on the side? I don't know. It's just because you work with them. I see them as people, so it feels weird to me that they just be in a bag somewhere for a year and a half.
Well, I actually, when they closed the gyms, I love running, I love weight training and doing all that. And when they shut the gyms, I started doing a lot more running outside, and I started to run. I became a bit obsessive. I started running about 10K a day every morning, and my brain was thinking, right, okay, I'm not going to get on stage for a while. This thing looks like it's going to be going on for quite a while, quite a time, and so I started coming up with ideas, running every day, and I'd come home, write them all down, and then a friend of mine who I've written with for a long time, I was having a chat with him, and I said, I've got all these ideas. I think I'm going to make a YouTube show, for my YouTube channel, and I'm going to produce it. I'll find a studio, and I'll do it all socially distanced. So I wrote and produced, or co-wrote and produced and directed and presented a show called Sponge Weekly, which you can see on my YouTube channel. And it was all from the first lockdown, and just all these. It's a silly little sketch show with me and the characters, and it's all to camera. It's got it's got different backgrounds with using green screen, all shot in a studio with all socially distanced. We had to do it by the rules, and so it was one of the most productive, creative times for me. Even though I wasn't able to get on stage and perform in front of a proper audience, I was still using the characters, so they were never left in a bag for a year and a half.
Brilliant.
I was constantly working on new material, but I did do some of those Zoom gigs. I have to say, I absolutely hated them, and I know that what a great idea and a brilliant way of adapting at a time when you need to do your performance and earn a living. So I take my hat off to people that have managed to make that work, and particularly a lot of magicians I know. I think magic works really well on Zoom. It's just like watching magic on TV, and a lot of interactive type stuff where you can do mind reading and mental stuff that works with with people sitting at home and still, these Zoom. I did do a few Zoom gigs, and I hated them, and so I said no to them all because I just didn't think it did me any favors, even though I needed the money. I just thought I can't bear to do them. I did do one last Christmas before last, and it was, I do pantomime at the London Palladium every Christmas, and we just opened the show on that on whatever day it was. It was a Saturday night, I'm guessing, our opening night, or Tuesday. It was a press night. Anyway, I just finished the show, and we did a matinee and an evening show. Then I had a private function in. This is after the pandemic, really. So I had a private function in a restaurant in Grosvenor Square, and then I had a taxi take me home, and I did a corporate gig for an American company in my kitchen. So I did 4 gigs this day, and it was that was my last American gig, and it was in my kitchen, and I was on at 12:30 at night, and which was, I don't know what time it was back there, but it was 5 hours, 8 hours behind, whatever. And I didn't see anyone. I saw the host pop up on the screen and introduce me, and then I saw a blank screen with some writing saying performance, going on, whatever. God. And I literally did my show just talking to my laptop. And I thought, I'm dying. I'm getting no reaction. But that's the one good thing about, being a ventriloquist. You've got someone to talk to. Whereas when you're just standing there doing stand-up, it's you and a microphone, just talking to a lens and not getting any reaction. That's even worse. Even though it was inside, I was thinking, oh, this is torturous. I still, I could just talk bollocks with whichever character I was doing. So I felt like I wasn't alone. But it was a horrific gig. They paid me really well, so I had to do it. But those sort of gigs were not my. They weren't my. And they're still, Zoom is a massive part of our lives now. And I'll be honest, I don't really like them. Yeah. I'd much rather be in a studio, like I did. I was doing some, promotion for my Paul Zerdin Puppet Man tour, and I was on Radio 2 the other week, back in the studio, and I'd guested on Steve Wright and various other shows over the years, and I'd always been in the studio. And then during that whole pandemic, you're at home, on the phone like this with your AirPods in, and there's nothing beats, and this is the only way we can make this work. So I appreciate it. This is why we're doing it and how we're doing it. But to be back in a studio again is so much more exciting.
Oh God, yeah. We used to do it when we did it in Camden. People would come to us at Comedy Central, and then obviously because of whatever happened, so we started doing it from Paul's studio in Tunbridge Wells. But the last couple of weeks we've had people come in, and we had Tom Stade came in, Rob Copland came in, and it just elevates the whole thing, and you're just having this mad kind of hour and a half or so in the studio, and it's brilliant. It's so much better. Gigs. I did the Zoom gigs. I did one live from the Bill Murray in Islington on my own in a room, just 2 cameras, no reaction. They didn't even put the seats out, and then the people that were controlling the cameras were downstairs in the basement, and I was just on my own in a room, just doing my stuff for an hour. Yeah, it's just like, oh my God. So I don't know. I think, but that just goes to show you that thing about drive that I said before. We got shut down. We didn't know what we were going to do. What we do, we have to do it live. But you found a way. You went, right, well, do you know what? All right, you had a moment, and you got into your running. But even that, you kind of didn't stop. You just went, I just need to do something, and so you got into your running, and that. So you've got that in you to keep pushing forward. Yes, which I think is,
and I think
lucky to have.
Most of us have that in this business. I think I like you were saying, you're always thinking about the next thing. What is the next routine? What's the next gimmick? Whatever it is. And even when I'm not writing a new show, I am always thinking of the next thing, and it is obsessive. I'm in the middle of the night. If I can't sleep, I've got my notes open on my phone, and I'm putting in stupid ideas. I'm walking around the supermarket the other day going, oh, hang on, that's a good idea. And I have to write it down because otherwise you forget it. And sometimes some of the best ideas have been at 2:00 in the morning, when I can't sleep.
Definitely.
And some of the worst ideas as well, when I've gone to bed a bit pissed and then woken up still a bit pissed and written something down and thought that's good. and in the morning I thought, no, Paul, what are you thinking? But it
What are you
is.
doing?
It's
Yeah.
the thing is, you're the only person that can make it happen. That's the whole thing, isn't it? No one's going to do it for you. You've decided to, take to the stage and do what you do, and so you've made that happen. You have to make the rest of it happen, and
Yeah.
so you're your own boss. So I love that, and I love the fact about I've really got into the whole. I've mentioned my YouTube channel a couple of times, but I love that whole. You have your YouTube channel. You're your own boss, and that's what I love. I've done
Yes.
many pilots over the years, and I've done lots of television, and I've had lots of success with television, and I've done lots of pilots for my own show and different types, different formats and things. I've never cracked that. I've never cracked that
No.
on terrestrial television, and there's always a commissioning editor somewhere that goes, oh, no. Even though I've got a million producers
Yes.
and directors that love what I do and want to work with me, I've never been able to get it past the commissioner, because the commissioner goes, oh yeah, we really like Paul. Yeah, let's see how he does on on whatever it is, another talent show or whatever. I think, hang on, I've been around here for
Yeah.
30 years now. You know what I do, and you know that people like what I
Yeah.
do. But for some reason, there's always been a stumbling block, and so the YouTube channel is basically me dropping my trousers and shouting bollocks at all commissioning editors in terrestrial television, because I am now my own commissioning editor, my own producer, my own director, my own casting director, my own performer. I'm all of that, and I love that control, that I can put out what I want. And some of the stuff I put out gets some really good viewing figures, and some stuff doesn't, and you really know quite quickly what people like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
And I think
It's
that's very
excellent.
exciting, and you build it up, and that is the way that people are viewing stuff now. Like my friend, we were talking about this the other day, my friend, he's in the business, and his kids, he said, oh, they don't watch telly, they just watch YouTube.
No.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting, it's all changing.
Well, it's funny. Watch it. You can see the industry now. Oh, you quietly panicking because they want to get in on the action, and like you've just said, we're like, well, no, we don't need you now. I don't need some dude in a suit that may or may not like what I do telling me, deciding my future. I'm now in, like you've said, I'm in control of my own destiny, and I'll do it myself. Thank you. And that's where, and now you can see the industry. They really want to get in on the TikTok thing. They want to get in on YouTube, but they don't know how, because they're not creatives. They was always reliant on us to bring the work to them, and then they decide what they were going to do with it. And now it's like, yeah, we're just doing it over here now, and you can watch it if you like, but we don't need you. So no, it's a nice place to be.
It is, and it's just it does take time. You've got to be patient, but you build up that audience, and then the fact that you are your own little ITV, this independent television, where you're making money from ad revenue. I think it's amazing, and there's some big money to be made, and there's a big audience, there's a big reach, and then that's that helps you sell your live show, so you can then tour all over the place. So it's long term, it's win-win.
This has been lovely, Paul. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
My pleasure.
There's a couple of things I want to ask you before you go. It's been great, man, honestly. You mentioned earlier, you said you hired an illusion. Now, I've heard of people buying things, but you said you hired one. Does that mean you can only use it for a certain amount of time, or for that one particular show, or is it the same thing?
So I hired an illusion from the magic shop, which was where the magic club that I belonged to was part of. I can't tell you what I hired, because that's the secret, but it enabled me to have my sister suspended in the air in front of me. And it was an illusion invented by a great magician called Robert Harbin, who was also very famous for inventing a trick called the zigzag lady, which is a box where the lady used to go into the box. Her head would be poking out a hole at the top. Her hand would be in the middle here, and her foot would be at the bottom. And they'd put two blades through, and then they remove the middle and slide it out to the side. And that was called the zigzag lady. And he invented that trick also. So he invented this this suspension. I think it's called the Harbin chair suspension, and I hired it and I rehearsed and rehearsed for quite a few weeks with my sister, who was not a magic assistant. She was my sister who was at school, and she rehearsed, and I was always, it was always about rehearsing. I never wanted to go on stage not knowing what I was doing. I had to know I had a plan and I knew that everything was okay, and so we rehearsed it, and it got a great reaction. But I can't tell you what I actually hired, but.
No.
It was worth it. What was your other question?
Yeah, I think the other one is: do you have with the puppets as well? Do you design those yourself? Do you have someone that does it for you? So look, I need a puppet that does. This is the character, and then do you have someone that you work with in that respect?
Yes, my first. Sam, who's my most well-known character, I suppose. I built the first one.
Right.
So I had another character that was very Muppety that had made for me. I'd seen an ad at the back of the Stage newspaper, puppet builder, and so I went and got a puppet. I mean, he was very Muppety, and he was my first kind of proper puppet. He was a bit like Ernie from Sesame Street. I auditioned for a TV show called Disney Club. As a presenter, and I didn't get it, but they said there's a new show starting up when GMTV was about to start, and Disney are in charge of the output of the weekends. You'd be better for that, and you could use your ventriloquism. So I then auditioned for that, and I got that, and they said, we love your puppet, but he's too Muppety. Could you come up with something else? So I went home. I was still living at mum and dad's, and I went to the local department store, and I bought a load of blocks of sponge foam, and I had mum and dad had an electric carving knife, and I carved the body and the head out of foam, and then I went and bought some toweling, and I made and glued it all together, and I made the first Sam prototype. And went back to the show for GMTV and Disney, and they said, oh my god, that's it, we love him. And so then we then had him properly made by a professional puppet builder, and that's how Sam came about. And then I wanted an old man character, which I saw at a ventriloquist convention in. That's a whole nother podcast. That is the ventriloquist convention. I saw that in America, and I bought an old man character off the shelf, and then I took him. I used him for a bit, tried in some jokes, and kind of got him working, then thought, well, I need to get him I need to redesign him because there'll be other people that have the same puppet, so I need him to be exclusive. So I then found another puppet builder, and he redesigned him, and then that's how Albert came about. And the baby, again, I found the baby at this ventriloquist convention, and then asked the woman who made him, because she'd made a few of the same ones, I asked her to make me a slightly different one. So he was for me, and then I've got a bodyguard character now, Roger, who was designed and built by a puppet maker called Darryl Warby, who's a great puppet maker, and I've got a fox as well, an urban fox, and he was built by Darryl and another guy called Tim Rose, who worked. These guys work on. I mean, Darryl built Yoda in the Last Jedi.
Oh wow!
And lots of TV and film stuff. Same with Tim Rose. He's done lots of Star Wars and Muppet stuff. So I come up with a silly idea. I'll make some little drawings and scribbles, and then I'll go to a puppet builder and say, this is sort of what I'm looking at. Then they'll do some better drawings. Go, you mean like this? And I'll go, oh yeah, that's it, but make the eyes bigger. And then it's quite a long process. But I normally have got the idea in my head, have had the idea in my head for quite a long time before it comes out. I'm actually working on another character which I'm thinking of building myself again, going back to the electric carving knife and the blocks of foam, and having a go. It's been a long time since I've done that, but I just thought it might be fun to have a go at it, and also a lot cheaper.
Yeah. I was going to say, because you've come so far from doing the holiday camps and things like that, and now you've got puppets that are made by. They're nearly in the Star Wars universe. I mean, that's what a journey, an incredible journey.
Well, it is. It's very exciting especially when you're in one of their workshops and you see all the stuff that they've built, and pictures and things these famous TV characters. Daryl's last time I was in his workshop, there's Basil Brush sitting there.
No way.
And that was that's a moment. He built Basil Brush, as well as all these amazing film characters. But yeah, no, it's you're limited only by your imagination, really. So it's a fun world to be part of, and especially me having been grown up with Sesame Street and all these Jim Henson things. I like to think of myself as a one man Jim Henson puppet show thing, with me and the characters, which you can see on the Paul Zerdin Puppet Man tour this autumn.
Paul, thank you so much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. And there was producer.
Oh, likewise.
This has been
Thanks
great.
very much,
Thank you, mate.
Insane in the membrane.